sure. I think everyone did, but then,
It didn't take long.
No.
Well, and then, of course, you have to remember, too, during the primaries, we were a lot more, I think a lot of us were a lot more terrified of Hillary.
Yeah.
Because there was so much baggage there and so much corruption in that administration that we thought, almost anything has got to be better than Hillary. And we've learned since, of course, we're wrong.
Yeah.
There is far worse than Hillary. But I think it took a while for people to start to get the sense of what he was about. And you remember, he was handled and controlled very, very well.
Yes, he was.
Very well-orchestrated campaign.
Right, and I think he was groomed for many years prior to.
I agree.
What I've learned,
all of his training, all of his Alinsky training, it falls perfectly into line with his campaign. I mean, it's straight out of the playbook.
Yeah, yeah. He had a childhood that would be less than perfect in anyone's eyes. He was effectively abandoned. He was moved around a lot. He was effectively dumped back at his grandmother's when he was...
Right. Well, he was actually abandoned more than once.
Yeah.
His father abandoned him, and then his mother, and then she came back and re-abandoned him. So these abandonment issues have been played over and over, and it's really significant the age that this happened. His mother's abandonment was probably the one that did the most damage, since his father was gone when he was an infant.
Right.
Mom dumped him just prior to the age of 10, which is a critical time, particularly for the development of narcissistic personality disorder.
Right.
And he moved around a lot. I mean, we also need to look at where he moved to. It's not exactly normal to take a 6-year-old child to Jakarta right after the hostilities with the Dutch are completed and the place is war-torn and destroyed and full of hot spots. I mean, it tells you something about the pathology of the parents, that they would, that a mother would take a child into this community, into this area.
Absolutely. She had her own issues. Apparently, she
Definitely.
I mean, she wasn't, one of these people who lived in Kansas where the corn is as high as an elephant's eye.
Well, they didn't live in Kansas that long.
Right, exactly. They moved to Washington State and then to Hawaii. And, it's interesting because he's in Africa now, and he has not gone near the east coast of Africa.
Isn't that interesting? No visits of Brother George at the hut?
No visits. No visits to Grandma. No visits to
or
anybody.
cousin of Dingo?
A cousin, especially not his cousin of Dingo, who is they were very close. I mean, their fathers go back. They definitely had a history there. And during the campaign, there were notations found and emails found from Obama Soturo telling Odinga that he would no longer be able to contact him directly with emails, that he had to go through his assistant.
Well, there's a photo of him campaigning with Odingo.
Oh, yeah, that was
which
early on.
They're claiming now was to talk about AIDS. Of course, I'm sure that was it. Great humanitarian that he is.
Yes. Well, this stuff just never seems to... It just doesn't get any better than this. It's become increasingly bad. It just gets worse and worse and worse.
It's every day, isn't it? You wake up and you go, oh, my God, what has he done now?
Yeah, it's like when I go to blog, I think I actually find some days I can't figure out what to write because there's just so much.
I blogged about that on my site. The title of it is something about Obama's giving us this embarrassment of riches for us columnists, because back in the olden days when I was doing AV, we even had things like Gary Condit, and we had 9/11, and still there were days when you'd have to sit down and think really hard about what are you going to write about this week, and Obama has eliminated all of that. We're now into an embarrassment of riches, as you said, that the more material that we know what to do with. But one of the problems he has caused for people like me who can be ever so slightly sarcastic at times, I'm sure nobody's picked that up yet, but what I would write as satire, I'm getting emails saying, you have to put a tag on there. Because I can say something really outrageous and preposterous about what Obama's doing, and people are like, oh, they're not catching that it's satire anymore. So I now am expected to label anything that I write that's satirical. I'm just kidding. This didn't really happen. Because he's so outrageous that it's not difficult to get your mind around anything.
Oh, absolutely.
Something crazy that he might do. The only thing that I think would stun people is if he did something patriotic.
Right. This is someone who did a 700-word speech on our Independence Day, on our 233rd birthday, and made not one mention of the word independence, patriotism, forefathers, nothing.
Well, and realistically, and I talk about this quite a lot in the book, why would he? His formative years were spent in a third world country. His mother, sure, she was born in Kansas, but she went to Mercer Island in Washington State, and the high school she went to was extremely left-leaning. It was very, very left. Her parents were always at Twitter about how much communist indoctrination they were getting. Back in those days, we still understood that there was that threat. And then Hawaii at that time was not exactly culturally in sync with Kansas. So, and then she trots him off to Jakarta, Indonesia. So it's pretty hard to say. The time that we would have been in kindergarten learning the Pledge of Allegiance and the Star-Spangled Banner, he was learning the Muslim prayers in Arabic. So there's no cultural foundation to think that he would be Americanized in any sense of the word.
And that shows up on a daily basis. I mean,
yes.
He cannot hide it. It's just being an American, you are so ingrained with certain knowledges and certain
traditions.
That you cannot cover that up. I mean, neither you nor I or any other American would make the mistake of how many states we had.
57.
57.
Well, actually, there are 57 Muslim states.
Right.
So he wasn't completely wrong.
Right. Well, but he was in America when he said that.
Right. He had to be corrected. That's a little disconcerting in the President of the United States. Although, again, I think it goes back to where the youth of our culture is right now. I'm not convinced that the average high school student knows how many states there are either.
Well, that
one would have sailed right over their heads if they went to public school.
Most of that stuff does, unfortunately, and it's become one of our primary purposes, we who are in this movement, to get the word out and explain to people what really happens, because they're not getting it from mainstream media.
Well, no, Bill Ayers is controlling the education, and we know who's controlling the media. One of the things I was shocked about when I was researching the book was just how influential Bill Ayers is in academia. Phyllis Schlafly's done a lot of work on it. And he's basically, he's the architect of most public school curriculums right now. His social justice insanity.
Well, he got a lot of that backing from his father, of course. His father was very, very connected, and he has used all these things and these monies to further his agenda. So
yes, and it also gave him a lot of cover.
Right.
Because anybody else would be in prison, and so would Bernadine Dorn.
Sure. I mean, she married him, and she's and now they're to quote Bill Ayers, guilty as hell and free as a bird.
It's a great country, or what?
Yeah, how great this country is. Ironic that he would want to change it so much, because he's changing a country that gave him full reign to do whatever he pleased.
Well, I don't know that he does want to change it, and this is one of the things I think people misunderstand about Saul Alinsky and the whole 60s radical movement. It's more the means justify the ends for them than the ends justifies the means. They spout a lot of slogans, but if you really read anything about Bill Ayers, you study his life, he was clearly a kid with an untreated conduct disorder. I mean, he writes about, there's something about a really great... He wanted to act out in a violent manner, and he pinned it on something external. I don't think he was ever dedicated to his ideology.